Welcome, YouTube. It's Chobra, and we just kicked off VCT Pacific. The first week is done. It was exciting. Overall, Pacific looks upgraded for sure, as we all knew it was going to happen. Clearly looks like the best region so far, so that's exciting. But that means it's time to now look forward to week 2. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do quick recaps, and as we go through, we're going to kind of give updated kind of ratings, rankings on these teams. So we'll update the rankings just like we did last year and kind of compare, am I moving teams up or down each week, and see how much movement there is over the course of the whole stage. And then at the end of the video, we will be doing our Pickems as well for week 2. We'll be updating those. So if you want to check those out, make sure you stay all the way to the very end. But with that all said, let's jump right in. All right, so just quick recaps on the matches we had. Obviously, we're going to have 6 matches every week, so it's going to be quite a bit to talk about. But let's just go right in order. So our opening match was DFM versus GE. And coming into the stage, I said, I think this is going to be a really important match. I think this kind of determines which of these teams has a good shot of basically being the 4th seed to go into playoffs. And I don't think I was wrong in that, but I do think GE looked about as strong as I expected. Although, no, we'll get back to that. Let's start with DFM, because DFM looked much weaker than I expected. I didn't expect DFM to have a lot of depth, but I did expect them to continue building on the strengths that they had during kickoff. And they looked rather lackluster on this one. I mean, we're not really seeing too much. They play the Euro Chamber composition, and there were like hints of understanding the comp, but overall, it didn't feel like it was really well put together, whereas GE was doing a lot of stuff on both maps, where they were doing good tempo control, and Patrick, who looked pretty comfortable with the rest of the team already on stage. Definitely like no signs of clear like nerves or anything. Sure, there might have been maybe one or couple mistakes here and there, but nothing like, oh, this dude's like in his own world right now. I mean, he's fragging, but he's in his own world. We didn't really see any of that. I guess the big notable is GN is a monster at headshots. That is a crazy number, no matter how many kills you have. Like, the aim is there for their aimers, but the teamwork and the trading and the aggression that we saw at kickoff and things like that, we're not actually seeing come through. So I think the silver lining is that GN looks more comfortable individually, and obviously DFM's kind of banking a lot on that. I think Akame continuing to be one of the fraggers is really good news for them, because May definitely has more support than he did in the past, I would say. But as a team, looks like maybe the meta shifts and the map shifts maybe affected them more than we thought it might. Meanwhile, on the other side, GE looked really good. They showcased why they've been saying nonstop that, like, we're going to be a very aggressive team, right? We're going to take the fight to them. We're going to play with tempo, things like that. They had all of that, but then they also had tempo control where they would suddenly slow things down, right? They'd go for like several fast hits, just deathballing through, and then they'd slow it down, kind of put those question marks on the map, things like that. And other people have talked about this as well, but they looked really drilled. There were moments, if you're watching the minimap, where they're like moving perfectly in sync. It's as if like you're commanding them from a bird's eye view, and the spacing is good, and they're all like covering each other, trading angles and stuff as they're moving and repositioning. And it just looks so drilled, and stuff like that. You can't always be like communicating at a micro level. That just has to happen. It just has to come through by nature. So that tells us that that's something clearly the coaches are working on with this team, which has never played together before this year, right? Like, this is a brand new roster. So the fact that they're able to do that is actually really impressive, and it kind of gives us a bit of insight into probably what their practice regimen looks like. And I think that is very, very promising. I think that's very promising, because that is what lets you solidify yourself as like a mid to high tier team, like a playoff team. Patrick, who looked like he was a little disappointed in his own performance, but quite frankly, I think he did exactly what he needed to for the team, especially on the Yoru. Like, playing solo Yoru, we've said it time and time again, is really tough, but he did space creation as he should. And it's not like he was just giving up first deaths only all the time, right? 6-4, I think, is pretty respectable for a solo Yoru. Yeah, I wasn't disappointed, but if he thinks he can do better, I'm all for it. I think that's exciting. Moving on to the next match. This is going to take a while if I talk this much about every match, but all the matches were quite fun and interesting. Next up on day 2, the RX battle. What to say? This was an interesting one. Very streaky. You know, PaperX fans were out celebrating. They were popping the champagne, and then they had to throw the bottle on the ground. It was quite the switcheroo. So Forsaken brings out the solo Waylay and makes it work. But again, we will always argue for the most part for solo Waylays that it's not really the Waylay, it's the player. I think Forsaken was a little bit half and half. I will say like 30-70, you know, 30 Waylay, 70 player. The fact that they have gone to Forsaken being primary duelist again after, what, 3.5 years, is quite the change. But I think long term it's a good one. I think Mindfreak going to Sentinel, primary Sentinel, is a good one long term. I think Forsaken being primary duelist is a good change long term. So then that leaves us with something in Jing. Are their changes going to be good? How do we feel about Jing's position? I think that Omens can actually be really good, because Omen can be a second entry at times as well. And I think it just allows him to, as long as he can just get used to making sure he's like responding to comms immediately for smokes and stuff, I think Omen's going to be really good. As for something, he did play the Breach at the end, but then he was playing the Sova. Oh, he played the Breach at Haven as well. I'm not going to say that it looks like it really fits him, but I feel from what we've seen, something is a good enough player that he can be above average on any agent that he picks up or any role that he plays. I think this is a worthy experiment. For stage 1 for PaperX. They were also, they were trying to play new comps. They were trying to cook things up. They had some good discipline every now and then. It looked like they were trying to keep track of the macro play from the other team. So overall, I think the foundation, the ingredients for PaperX trying to evolve is there. It's just the evolution's not complete yet. For DRX, if you kind of get rid of these first 8 rounds here, I guess they got wrecked on Icebox. Yeah, I guess they did get wrecked on the ending of... this was a weird one. I guess we'll have to talk about the elephant in the room, which is Flashback playing Neon. And then the Yoru. I like that they're doing double duelist because it makes Hyunmin's life a lot easier. Flashback's Neon isn't... We're not comparing it to any of the other great Neons, but, he's a mechanically gifted guy. Obviously, he got frags, but, right, we're talking about, is he utilizing the Neon as best as he could be? Not yet. I'm okay with it. It does look like DRX is also trying to figure out how do they want to play the meta, right? It looks like they're trying to move off of the Tejo, try a little bit more double duelist here and there. Pretty interesting changes. I think this was just interesting because this match showed us the direction that each team wants to go. They're just not at their destination yet. All right, we got 3 more matches left. Talon versus Team Secret. Okay, this one's going to be an easy one to talk about. Killua, great. Fantastic. And Thai, also really solid. I think, despite Thai having a higher rating here, I think Thai definitely showed a little bit more situations where the inexperience showed through a little bit, which obviously makes sense, right? Thai got called up from the Academy roster, whereas Killua has been playing Challengers. Killua looks solid. Killua looks like he is absolutely in the running for Rookie of the Year, for sure. Did allow Talon to push come to shove, go for just a lot more death balling when needed, but they weren't relying on that every single time. That wasn't the call from the get-go every single time. I do think Cruz wasn't quite at the level of IGLing as I expected him to be with an all-tie squad, but maybe it's, trying to get the younger players on board, the rookies on board, and things like that. So they also played the solo Waylay, and they also won with it. But again, I'm still not convinced. But it looks like they're obviously still cooking with comps and whatnot to see what fits for them. Very promising. On the flip side, for Team Secret was Team Secret. There isn't much more to say here. Very default heavy, which is funny because we found out that 2GE is now calling for this team. It's interesting because it looked like Jesse Vash was calling. It looked very default heavy, react to it, play retakes, and things like that. And then the last day, Boom versus Genji. So obviously I predicted Boom here. Yes, I thought it was going to be an upset, but I thought it was quite the possible upset because we're considering Genji bringing in new players into the roster. where considering Gen.G didn't look like they really knew how they wanted to play at kickoff. Meanwhile, Boom looked like they had a decent idea of how they wanted to play at kickoff, but they just couldn't quite close it out. And then you consider that Boom, therefore, is probably even hungrier than ever to have a good start. They realize that this is the best opportunity that they have to beat Gen.G. And even before that, Famous and Berserks, those guys, they've had great games. They've had fantastic games. It's just not every single time. So I thought if they were able to align that, which if you're motivated enough, you should have some control over, that this was possible. I want to expand on this and say, we'll talk about this more in the ranking, but there is a very specific reason why I thought the Gen.G roster change would imply that Boom can win here. And the core part of it is that my bet was that Gen.G wants to play the same way that they did in 2024, which is exactly what they were doing in this match, and Boom had a good read on it. They had a very good read on just not giving the chance for Munchkin to go for these crafty rotates, not giving him that tempo, and always hitting the weaker side before anyone's able to get there. So Boom played this really well. Like, Boom showed good prep. They showed really solid discipline. They showed that they were cooking comps that work for them. The Phoenix comp, the more I thought about it as we were watching the match, it's so good specifically for Boom because they've always been a very, like, get up to right up to the entrance of wherever you want to fight and then do a big, do like a mini execute, a set play to go in and then frag out and trade. And Phoenix does exactly that, but now you can get up to that area with Tejo a lot easier. So this was good, especially on Ascent. I mean, did it help that DOS9 is dropping 57 kills and he's plus 27? Yes, absolutely. Did that matter? 100, 200%. But it does feel like DOS9 is generally going to be fragging quite a bit, just given his performances so far. 35 kills on Haven, no less, against Gen.G is very impressive. Silver lining? Oh, and then simply the greatest match of week one, chat. NONGSHIM Red Force versus RRQ. A rematch from kickoff. NONGSHIM Red Force had eliminated RRQ, and I would say from RRQ's POV rather early at kickoff in that crazy long overtime best of 3. But NONGSHIM Red Force does it again. They win 2-1 once again. Now, they did have to play the Ascent. So what did they ban? They chose to ban the Fracture, and they decided to leave the Ascent open, which I think they should have expected a little bit, like either Ascent or Haven, right? Because both of them, RQ has always been very confident in, and both of them are maps that NONGSHIM Red Force never really liked or picked. So very, very good pick from RQ. Good prep. And NONGSHIM Red Force, they bring out the solo Waylay. And if you can't tell from all of these red numbers and no reds on the attacking AF, it wasn't good. I think they'll probably have to recook this a little bit. Meanwhile, RRQ, I mean, Jemkin went crazy. 9-1 in first kills, first deaths on Ascent. They got split. RRQ continued to look really solid, and then they couldn't win a single attacking half. And I think it showcased perhaps the weakness that Crazy Guy often has had as an IGL, and maybe even RRQ as a team, which is being decisive and super proactive. I think Crazy Guy really shines as a defensive IGL. I still rate his IGLing overall very highly, but especially also this composition on NONGSHIM Red Force was very defensive. I mean, you have GravNet, you have refreshable GravNet, you've got Barrier Mesh, the wall from Deadlock, you've got Salvos, you've got the Tejo stun, and then you've got the Hinder coming in from Waylay. So, and then you've got Snakebite and you got Paranoia. So you have to like take out at least 60% of these abilities before you can really commit to a guaranteed execute. And RQ is having trouble with that because to do that, you had to get aggressive to bait it out. But they got caught early on in the half by like the GravNet or the Hinder and got comboed by the Salvos that they started playing scared. And then they really just never got those abilities out. The Indonesian fans were partying. They were partying at halftime, which in retrospect was too early because it was split and 8-4 is like anybody's game. The Pearl was a fun game though. I mean, the Pearl had decent back and forth, some good adjustments back and forth. Good kind of like util trading and mind games over on A main, things like that. But overall, it came down just to a couple more heroics, really, from Margaret. I mean, Margaret clutches up like 2 crucial rounds late in the second half. And then even wins, obviously, at the end on his own right. You know, it was a 1v2 and it turns into a 1v1 and he still wins it. So that's really what it comes down to. But that's what it always comes down to for RQ. It always comes down to the impact clutches, the impact multi-kills, just 1 or 2 rounds whenever they have these close to 1-2 score lines. And you have to wonder because Cushy is highest rated, and rating's not everything, but clearly highest rated, right? You're not falling behind in kills. I actually think they might have more kills overall in this series, or maybe just barely. And you farmed the first map. Now compiling all that data, RQ, they win hard when they're winning. They like win better when they're winning. But the moment they're not winning, the impact just kind of shrivels away. And you see this in a lot of grand finals. That's the big difference. It was the big difference at Masters Bangkok. It's almost always the big difference of, can you make 1 or 2 more impact plays than the other team? Because if you're both in the grand finals, that means you're both obviously really, really good teams at that time. So with all that said, where are we ranking everyone for week 2? Where do I see their power levels? So this is what we had for week 1. And this is actually kind of scuffed already because these rankings were for by end of stage 1 is kind of where I'm thinking, like, or over the course of the whole stage, where do I rank their power level? Is how I ranked these. And quite frankly, if you look at this, I think I did rather well. I think week 1 reflects this quite well. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing because I think things are going to shift quite a bit as we go through the stage. But, you know, people were going crazy about this one. And I mean, I think Paper Rex maybe deserved a bit more. But, you know, overall, like Talon and RQ, I think it's pretty reasonable. I think maybe the only one that deserves an apology is Boom Esports, but over the course of the whole stage, I'm not too concerned. I think maybe DFM and Zeta get swapped. So let's talk through it. So this is overall just what I think over the course of stage 1. What's my power rating, right? If I'm gauging them, power level overall. Zeta and let's just get the easy one out of the way. DFM. They somehow regressed. I don't know if they're going to be able to fix. I don't know if they're going to like rediscover the errors of their ways, so to speak. I mean, sure, they have May still, and they can still frag out, but quite frankly, everyone can frag out now. Over the course of a whole stage, the teams that recognize their mistakes and are working on it are just going to get better. And to me, Zeta showed that they recognize that they can't just sit around and twiddle their thumbs until the last 20 seconds. And I know the bar's low, but that's like a huge improvement for Zeta Division. Honestly, let's go with this for now, but I might still keep Boom at 11th in terms of just overall stage, right? I predicted them to beat Gen G. I believed in it, but I also believed that was an upset. I still think it was an upset over the course of a whole stage. So we'll see. I do think things aligned for Boom that day. I'm not saying it's a fluke. I'm just saying they were able to pull all of it together. Team Secret, honestly, I'm like totally fine at 9th. I'm totally fine with them at 9th. Their defaults are still good. Their retakes are still good. And that honestly, that's going to go a long way. But it's nothing impressive, and I don't have faith that they're going to change. GE, I'm okay because this would be the playoff cutoff, and I think that's a safe spot. I think they can punch up, obviously, but I think it's fair to still consider those upsets. Let's see. Paper X Gen G. I mean, the IGLing with 2G, the thing is like, if I couldn't tell at all, if I just believed watching it that it's totally Jesse Vash IGLing, it doesn't mean anything to me, quite frankly, that 2G is IGLing. It didn't make a difference. Just going into week 2, power rating, Paper X over Gen G. But the thing is, Boom just played so well. To me, this is more of a question of, do I think Paper X deserves a bump up? T1 DRX, I'm fine, not changing. NONGSHIM, I'm fine. Talon, I'm fine, honestly. No, I like what Paper X is cooking, though. Like, to me, see, the reason I'm rating Zeta and Paper X is I like the direction that they've cooked for week 1. So if they continue cooking on that, I expect it to be even better, because I think what they're cooking is very appropriate for each team, like similar to what Boom cooked. Like, I think Boom cooked very appropriately for themselves coming into week 1. I know it was streaky and weird, but when has a Paper X game not been weird? Their matches have always been weird. Even when they were winning, it's always been weird. I don't think that is the crazy part. But Forsaken, like, you have to think about Forsaken on Primary Duelist, Jing on, like, mainly Omen. Well, let's go with the surefire parts. Forsaken on Primary Duelist, Devi on kind of like Primary Flex, Mind Freak on Primary Sentinel. I think that's like a good foundation. I really like Mind Freak on Primary Sentinel. It also allows him to kind of be a little bit more autonomous, which I think he might enjoy finally being able to do that. Did I intend to have chat up? I actually didn't. It doesn't matter, but it is covering the title. So you guys are going to have to go away. Drop Paper X and Genji into the abyss. Here comes the reactionary people. I'm telling you right now, if GE and Genji play today, I probably vote GE, but I'm voting for the upset. Right? Ranking doesn't mean that they can't beat them. But honestly, my gut, but RQ is so tough because it's like they just can't close it out. They just can't close out the game. They just don't have that. To put it simply, they just don't have that X factor when they need it. Like, they have X factor, but it doesn't come out when they need it. And they use up all their X factor when they're winning. Basically, to me, it just means I can't, in good conscience, put them in top 4. But quite frankly, 5th or 6th doesn't really matter at that point. Simple solution: win go up, lose go down. But then why would I make a video about it? You would just look at the results page on VLR. Okay, so top 4, I'm locked. I'm giving Talon a bit of a pass, but I liked what I saw, and I think it'll only get better. So top 4 is locked. 5 through 7 is where I'm a little torn, and then like 8 through 11. This is a little bit of just gut check, but I just don't think Team Secret is moving down or up for the whole stage. I think Team Secret, for me, this is exactly where they belong. At which point, like, I think Boom in a vacuum could be a 9th ranked team, but do I think Boom over GE? I'm not convinced, because the fundamentals that we saw from GE were really strong, and they were like subconsciously being done. I mean, I'm not in the comms, obviously, and I know there was a comms video that came out, but it's going to be edited. The fundamentals were so good on GE. I think Team Secret will continue to be that power check team. So I'm going to leave them there. I'm going to tank DFM. I am a bit more hopeful on Zeta, but definitely not as hopeful as Boom. I'm fine with this. I think GE at 8th going into week 2 is pretty reasonable. So then the question becomes Paper X, RQ, and Gen G. I think RQ is definitely above Gen G at this point in time. The problem with Paper X and RQ is I think Paper X wins the matchup. They will never play each other during the group stage, but I think they win the matchup. But I think power level wise, RQ's a bit more reliable. Just because I guess if I were to, I'll keep myself honest. If I were to put Paper X at 5th, it would be because I believe they're going to get even better for week 2. And I've already done that for multiple teams like Talon. So if I'm not doing that, then RQ and Paper X. RQ and Paper X then. Is NONGSHIM still number 3? Yeah, I think so. Obviously, straight up, I'm just going to say it. For NONGSHIM specifically, there is bias, but also the fact that they clearly learned a lot about how to bounce back in their mental and how to stay focused and things like that, because they got destroyed on Ascent. And it was not looking fun on Split either, but they were still able to do it. And I also just think the fact that they are able to have impact clutches when they need it to win versus RQ not having that, Like that X factor, I think matters a lot. I think it matters a lot. So these are the changes that we had from last week. Which all seems fairly reasonable. Other than Paper, I guess Paper X lost and moved up, but that's a more consequential thing of Gen G, in my opinion. 3 weeks later, do I still think Boom beats Gen G every single time? I think in week 1, if they played 10 times, I think Boom wins 7 out of 10 times. But like this week or next week, I wouldn't be so sure. I wouldn't be so sure. I still think Boom has a good shot, but I wouldn't be so sure, to be very honest. Boom can say this is unfair, and it is, but it's also just the truth, is that I haven't seen this form from Boom enough. Like the way they were playing, off of each other. And here's the thing, especially for individuals, like I've seen Famous and Berserks go crazy before. I've seen them just absolutely carry games before. And then I've seen them do nothing the next game. So to me, they did that. They're capable of doing it. I knew that. That's what I was counting on when I predicted them. But I don't have the faith that they're going to do that in week 2. So I'm not going to believe in that until I see it like 2-3 weeks in a row. You know what I mean? Like I'm not trying to harp on those players. They have that potential, but this is the start to them being able to prove that they can do it now consistently. The potential was always there. I think people think they look terrible because they're doing nothing special and then they lost. But that's how they've always been, though. They do nothing special, but literally doing nothing special, good or bad, has always been good enough to be the team that determines whether you're a better team or not. That is where I stand. I'm going to lock this in for week 2. So the initial list was overall for stage 1. Now we're doing week to week. Should we call this week 2 or just week 1? Because it's like after week 1 power rankings. I don't know. I don't know what the titling should be. Let me know down in the comments below what the titling should be. I just want to remind everyone, a lot of people got mad that I had Gen G ranked 6th. They thought it was too low. They thought it was crazy that Talon, RQ, NONGSHIM were all rated higher. Doesn't look so crazy now, does it? I'm just saying. Now, with this in mind, let's do our Pickems. Because this is what you have to remember. This is why we're doing both. The reason we're going to do both is because a team can be ranked lower, but I can have belief that they're going to punch up and get the upset. Okay, so I think Team Secret wins this for week 2. Again, I'm kind of just banking on the fact that I think Team Secret is just this uninteresting, immovable rock. They're not going to do anything, right? They're not going to do anything fancy. They're not going to show me any cool dance moves. They're not going to fall over and make me laugh. They're just going to be a little rock that just doesn't move. And I think that's going to be enough. I know that makes it sound really bad, but I think Zeta still just needs a little bit more time to ramp up. I don't think it's going to be a 2-0. I think it is going to be 2-1. T1 versus NONGSHIM Red Force. Obviously, I ranked T1 still at number 1, very reasonably so. But I actually think this is the best shot. Well, I think this is the best shot that NONGSHIM Red Force has at beating T1. I don't think week 1 would have been good. But I think the confidence of beating RQ again, getting through another, one of a kind of tough best of 3 again, and then also kind of learning a couple errors about your Waylay comp and how you were playing it or where it went wrong is going to be good against T1. I don't think T1's going to bring anything too crazy new. If you think about the maps, though, T1, the map draft is still very bad for NONGSHIM. That is the biggest weakness against some of these teams that like the traditional maps like Haven, Ascent, and I guess we'll count Icebox. That is going to be the trouble because both RQ and T1 like all 3 of those maps. But I think T1, at best, they change their comp for like one of the maps that they end up playing. I think the other ones, they still kind of rely on basics. It's one of 2 things. Either T1 relies on basics, so the ante still applies. Obviously, they're still really good mechanically, but the ante still applies. Or number 2, they do begin experimenting all around, and it makes it much more vulnerable. To me, it's one of those 2 things. T1 has 2 game plans here, and either one of those is the best shot that NONGSHIM Red Force has. Right? So week 2 is the best shot NONGSHIM Red Force has. Obviously, I'm not a solo Waylay believer, but the way they played it on Split, especially on defense, I think they utilized the Waylay really well. Gen G versus Paper X. Let me come back to this one. DRX versus DFM, easy. DRX. RQ versus Talon. Oh, I think I have to go with Talon on this one. I think RQ is sturdier still. But I think, again, just like we saw with NONGSHIM, I think Talon has more X factor that can pop up in times of need. I think if RQ wants to win, they have to win 2-0. The other thing that's a little concerning for RQ is that because it's Crazy Guy, unless he starts playing a lot more random smokes for flex, I think they're kind of committed to the solo Yoru at the moment. And you have to play that without errors against a team of fraggers. I hadn't really considered this because originally I just considered like the individual player power of like the IGLing and just like individual prowess. But I do think I do think Estrella made them more flexible in their comps. Like they can't do double duelists anymore, right? Because Monyet has to play the smokes. I'm not saying double duelist is the answer, but that alone starts to really limit what you can do. And then if you like want to play a Tejo on most of these maps, things like that. So Jemkin might be good, but also, again, what have I said about DRX and Hyunmin is that solo Yoru, Hyunmin's great, but it's so much pressure on the guy. Like you have to do so much. You have to create space. You also have to you have to create those X Factor kills. Sometimes you have to go in the lurk and find the timings on your own. Like a lot is asked of you if the team isn't perfectly crafted around you, which is why G2 made it work all the way to the end, is because they were the closest to making sure that was consistently done for Jogamo. But I think right now, RRQ may be in a bit of a meta rut. Like the team power level individually may be stronger still, but I think the comps might, I think it makes it harder. And I think Talon shines in those scenarios. I think Talon will eat that up. Boom versus GE. I got to go with GE here. I don't think Boom's gonna like drop. I don't think so. I think they're still gonna play quite well. I don't know if they're gonna play as well as they did against Gen.G, but let's say like they play at like 85% of that power level. I think that's still really, really good. But GE looks drilled, and GE will take the aggression to you. And Boom traditionally does not deal well with that because, again, their style is we set up and then count to 3, boom, as the name goes, pun not intended, we go in and we fight. And GE may be good at finding those off timings against them. Gen.G is not a team that finds those off timings against you. Meteor was a player that finds those off timings against you. And I think Boom identified that very well. They actually abused it quite well against Gen.G, especially on Ascent. So I'm going to go with GE. I think some of these players will still frag. I think this will be a bloodbath. Probably a 2-1. Probably a bloodbath. But yeah, I mean, I think a 50-50 is fair. I have no problem with calling this a 50-50, but I'm going to favor GE. But I don't think you're crazy if you vote Boom. So the only one I didn't do is Gen.G Paper X. Oh. Gen.G Paper X. Oh, man. Movable object versus stoppable force. I think Paper X will take this. The thing is I think Gen.G will look better. I guess Gen.G's gonna hate me for saying this, but Paper X, if you're watching, which I don't know why you would, because tier lists are silly, but if you are watching, just find out where Ash and Suggest are and just friggin' run them down as 5. I'm not even saying it's because they're the weakest players, but they're put in a position where they have to fight 1v5. Gen.G plays in a way where they have to 1v5. Like Ash has to 1v5 Util, and Suggest has to 1v5 Anchor. And unless that style changes in a week, I mean, you know what you gotta do. I don't know if they can change that because that's a fundamentally stylistic thing. I don't think the flame that Suggest is getting is fair in this match against Boom. I think Boom just abused the way Gen.G set him up, like to no end. I think they just made his life miserable. And I think Ashen's just going to look better in this game. But especially for Ash, I mean, listen, Paper X might not have the same magic against everybody else anymore because everybody else has played against him. But I know this is like an old thing, but Ash has never played against Paper X. And if his util breaks down because he's not used to Paper X's style, that spells trouble for Gen G. The map pool does favor Gen G, but I actually don't think Ascent necessarily does, because Paper X seems to be a bit more disciplined. I actually don't think Ascent necessarily does. And Icebox too. Icebox is at the end of the day a dual map. Gen G used to be good at Icebox, but again, is just going to go out and get all that space every single time successfully? You know what? The interesting thing, I do want to mention this because I guess I'm not going to do a separate VOD review of that game. Suggest was playing like Meteor. He was trying to take these timings. A lot of times he actually had decent timings where he's trying to get space. But Meteor also wins those duels 9 out of 10 times. And that's what I mean. It's such a tough way to play. And that doesn't mean Suggest is bad. That just means Meteor is goated. This is coin flippy. This is 50-50. This is a coin flip. I know a coin flip is 50-50, but they mean very different things in this context. I'm going to go with Paper. I don't feel good about this one. This one I don't feel good about. This one I'll stick with it. This one I don't feel good about. This is just question marks all over the place. And who knew? 2025. Imagine telling someone in 2024 that Gen G versus Paper X was just going to be a match full of question marks. Nobody would believe you. But chat, you can believe me. Because I am the elite 0.3%. You can believe me. You can believe me. My Pickems are perfect. It's a fact. My Pickems are perfect. So feel free to copy them. All right, so that's going to be it for this week's. This probably ran long. I don't know if I'll have edited it or not, but if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching. If you enjoy it, hopefully you subscribe to the channel as well. But definitely leave a comment down below on which match you're looking forward to the most. And I mean, feel free to rip apart my power rankings if you want, but it doesn't matter because it's, you know, it was correct. It was correct at the start of the stage, and there's no reason for it to be not correct for week 2. So that's okay. But everyone's entitled to their own opinions, and I respect that. But I do think discussion around like power, and especially now in this meta, is very good. It's a very healthy meta to have discussions around power, like power rating, and what you think teams, like what style of teams you prefer versus other people. Because I think there's going to be a lot of stylistic choices throughout stage 1. That's going to be it for this one. Make sure you tune into the Pacific matches as well. We'll be watch partying on our channels, both on YouTube and Twitch as well, every single day. And I think we're in for another great week too. The matchups all should be very interesting, quite frankly. So this should be another fun weekend. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.